On this episode of A State of Control, we talk about the 2017 Harman Developers Conference. We talk about the evolution of the AV programmer as they turn into software developers, the influence of standardized programming languages, and where the industry is heading. All that and more on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Extron Electronics.
A State of Control, episode 38, Code Switching.
This is A State of Control.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, automation, and programming aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us. So we have a great show on tap for you today. For those of you who joined us about a year ago, we had episode 27 that talked about the 2016 version of the Harman Developers Conference this year. We recently passed the 2017 Harman Developers Conference that was held in Richardson, Texas. And with me to discuss the event are three guests who were in. First, I'm going to start with the host from Harman. His name is Chris Backus. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate you having us on and for talking about the event.
You're welcome. Glad to have you. Next is somebody who's become a regular on the show, or, fairly familiar guest. His name is Dave Hatz from AVI Systems, newly promoted member of the company. Welcome, Dave. How are you?
Doing great. Again, thanks for having us.
And last but not least, somebody who I've gotten to know for the last couple of years. He's new to AVI Systems, but not new to the industry. His name is Jason DeVito. Welcome, Jason. Thanks for joining us.
Steve, thank you. Thank you for the invite, for joining in on this today.
Thank you. So this year's event was a little bit different, in my opinion. It had a little bit of a unique feel, and I wanted to talk about some of the aspects of it that made that unique. Typically, we have a manufacturer's conference, and we talk about products, and we talk to support people, and we talk to product managers, and we may sometimes get in the weeds that are really specific to a particular manufacturer and particular situations. This year, I think the conference had a little bit of a higher level view of the AV industry, control programming, and what those that attended, what their roles were and their involvement in the industry. And so, Chris, I'll start with you, since you're the person behind putting in. What was the thought process behind kind of changing the approach and some of the topics that were discussed?
Well, essentially, in some of the pre-event planning, when we were looking at the agenda, historically, you're right, we'd looked really deep on some of the products, and so when I was looking at the recent trade show announcements, I think several on the that are listening to the podcast will know that AMX specifically had been a little bit quieter than normal in recent trade shows and our, I would say, frequency of releasing product. And so we've looked, as Harman Pro, we've released a number of different products, both at ISE and at Infocom, but I didn't have as many AMX specific products that needed a lot of attention because of the types of applications that those releases and announcements were aimed at, more kind of configured solutions like the Ascendo family and things of that nature. So when I looked at a developer conference of things that would be impacting that historically AMX programmer community, I wanted to kind of take a look up, because I think we're in a really exciting time in our industry, not just for Harman, with obviously the acquisition by Samsung. With that closing, there's a lot to talk about there, but also just as an industry, it's really starting to accelerate as we look at some of those concepts that I know we're going to talk about today. And so that's where I chose to spend a lot of our time kind of looking up and ahead, so that the folks that were able to join us for the event can start to spend whatever time they have available looking out at those needs that are going to be coming at us very quickly in the near future, and how they may want to shift their priorities on training and things of that nature. So it was really more of a look at where Harman is in terms of our change and our morphing into a Samsung company, as well as where I see the market shifting to.
So Dave, Chris talks about changes in Harman, changes in the industry. I am also experiencing some of the same. From your perspective and from the perspective of your company and your role, and in approaching this type of an event, what were some of the things that really got you thinking?
Well, I think Chris alludes to it, and I agree. It really is sort of an exciting time where, if you look at the way AV programmers have functioned for the last 20, 25 years, we've traditionally taken boxes, pieces of equipment, and made them work together. We're the glue and the integrators that make that happen. And ultimately, we deliver the experience to our end users that they've purchased. And as you look at the way, the industry has sort of gone over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we're pushing the bounds of what we can do. We're not just programming to talk between box A and box B. We might reach out to the Exchange server and actually bring user authentication against the IT network in there. We might reach out to other cloud services and bring other information back in. And so we really are starting to become more traditional software developers. We're still doing the same function in a lot of ways. We're delivering that experience to our end users, but we're doing it with information and data sets that are new and unique to the way we've done things in the past. And so an event like the Developer Conference, I love to see that there's this focus on new ideas, new ways of approaching things, because it really fits and it's really timely with the way we as a company are approaching our customers, and the way many of our competitors, many of the others in the industry. Certainly, I think everyone in the room at the Developers Conference would agree that the topics were all really applicable to either challenges that we have or opening our eyes to challenges that we don't even realize we have.
So Jason, I know that you've experienced probably a number of different situations over the years, and been in different roles. We are kind of seeing how the programmer is becoming a software developer, as Dave is saying, and we are seeing how we have to justify our presence and our involvement a little more than we may have had to in the past. So what are some of the things, when you're talking with a customer, or when you're looking at your role in a project, how do you add value beyond what's been done in the past?
Well, as David said, the traditional role of a control system programmer has evolved. We are becoming more software centric, and from an enterprise level, and just deployments of how we handle things. So you have to be an expert in many different things. You can't just be a control system programmer. You have to understand networking. You have to understand power requirements. You have to understand so many more things than just talking to the boxes. So you have to be able to present yourself in a way that allows or provides the customer you're interfacing with comfort, knowing that you can be that subject matter expert in the middle and still being the glue to the project. Through the years, I've had to work not just in like the drafting of systems and the installation of systems, but the troubleshooting. Sometimes understanding the engineering side of it helps with the control system programming and the software development, because you have this bigger picture in your mind of how everything ties together. And so as we've moved forward and we've gone from serial control and IR control, and we're now migrating to IP control, and that's been for years. But now beyond IP, as David said, we're reaching out to other servers to authenticate users or to get additional data. So now you're transitioning that bounds of control system programming into the need of understanding external technologies to AMX or Crestron or whatever the control system may be, and how you have to then tie that software together. So it really has taken a lot of effort to, push those bounds through training and exercise and just keeping up with the industry.
Well, and one of the things, Jason, you hit on there is, the AV programmer has always been one of the smartest people in the room. They're the ones who really know a pretty good deal, if not everything, about the commissioning of the system, being able to check the signals, checking the cable continuity, as well as developing the software. And as we look at, one of the things I see that, we're approaching and the challenges we face as a company is, does the programmer need to be the expert on every single thing they touch? Or is one individual an expert on certain APIs, certain communication protocols, certain programming languages? And the person sitting next to them is also an expert in some of that, but also in some different fields. And do we approach the development of software a little more as a team-based because of that diversity of what we need to know? And I know we talked about that at the developer conference too. And, everyone approaches it a little different, but it's one of those unique things that's starting to come, really to the forefront.
Well, and I always like to approach it with this mindset of, we are Swiss Army knives, and out of our set of blades, one may be sharper than another.
Yep.
But part of that, part of holding that blade in your hand is very much knowing other experts in your industry that you can tie back to when you may have a limited set of knowledge, but someone who has done that previously and you can reach out to them. So that is part of that toolkit.
I think Dave hits on something really important there with this team-based concept of, historically in AV control systems, we've been kind of not necessarily generalists, but we cover the entire gambit. You know a little bit about audio, video, networking, just lighting, the entire spectrum. Whereas if you look at your counterpart in maybe a traditional software development role, they are more siloed. And so if I look at an IT department and I look across their specialties, whereas we might look and understand the entire project, there are individuals within an IT organization that might just be the database person. And even more subdivided than that, maybe they're just the authentication part of that and connecting into different databases, right? Not necessarily the architecture of that. And so it's very siloed, but for a reason, because they have very deep specialties, whereas we've been more broad in our application of it. And so what I think we're seeing here in this shift that we talk about is our buyers changing, the market's changing, and we as a result have to change. And so what I mean by our buyer changing, we've all talked convergence for a long time, and we believe that for most of us, we're fully converged there within IT organizations. But what that does is in most cases has put AV up underneath an IT organization umbrella. So as we look at that buyer for that organization, how are they making purchase decisions, and what are they used to talking as far as the language that they use in those conversations with a software provider or another solution they're looking at to solve the IT challenges that their organization is facing? And so one of the things we really wanted to talk about at the conference to make sure folks are starting to shift the language. Forever we've been integrators, and that language still applies. But Dave mentioned earlier the types of devices we're touching now are growing beyond the room. And I know some that listen to the podcast will say, well, Chris, I've been doing room-to-room communications forever, or I've been talking outside my room forever. And that's not what I'm saying. My point is we've been very good at controlling a room, but now our boundaries are reaching out, and they're growing out beyond the traditional AV world into now what many would consider traditionally IT-type interfaces. And so as our reach grows to touch and interface with those, when we reach to troubleshoot and figure out how to solve problems, we have to reach out to new audiences that speak a completely different language. And oftentimes they're saying the same thing, it's just they're using different words. Whereas we would say we've written control system code where we talk to a bunch of different systems. Well, the counterpart to that in an IT organization is a middleware developer, right? Where he's talking to a bunch of different systems writing code. That sounds a lot like what we do. But in the IT world, that person's known as a middleware developer. And so, integration is something that's been around forever, but I think one of the things we want to encourage is really a shift in language, and that's one example of that type of language shift. Additionally, as we grow out into these other broader IT worlds where we look at GAFA, the Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazons of the world, they are interested in huge markets, right? Mass market appeal of product. And so as a manufacturer in the control system, historic Infocom's or CDS segment, you would think that they are selling thousands and tens of thousands of boxes. Well, if you look at the other end of the consumer electronic spectrum, they are selling hundreds of thousands and millions of boxes. And so how do you take that leap from thousands or tens of thousands of boxes outward? And that's through open APIs. And that's where I think we're starting to see that it's so easy to interact with some of these other systems because they're so well documented and the APIs are so robust that we can actually just hop right in. And to that community, that's quite normal, right? Why wouldn't you do that? But for our community, I think everyone would agree. We've been fairly closed-minded for a while. If you want to talk to me, this is the only way, and this is my path. And so it's been very siloed by manufacturer. And to some extent, APIs are the same way, but I think they've opened up doors to increase velocity. So I know that was a quick little turn on your agenda there. But I do just want to stress that point that we talk about velocity and the speed of adoption, and to go to that 100,000 and millions of units, that's really where the key to success is. And our key as control programmers is to hop on that bandwagon and be conversant in those systems and solutions and be able to interact and engage with them.
So Chris, along those lines, and we talked about a little bit about training, and we talked about how things are changing, the roles are changing. When you are in part of your world and your role at Harman is being responsible for the training and the training pathways. How do you kind of factor all this in? And is that the responsibility of a manufacturer, or do programmers have to start to look broader, and not necessarily say, I have my certification, it's going to get me where I need to go?
Right. No, that's a fantastic question. And one, unfortunately, I don't have a concrete answer for you because I see both sides of it, right? To your point, as a manufacturer, I need to make sure I deliver training that will ensure success with my product, right? So I need to be able to take a person that is completely green to our industry, get them up to speed, and make them capable of delivering a successful outcome for our ultimate end customer. However, I would say that path towards success gets a little bit easier as we move towards more standardized languages. You've seen some folks go to Python. You've seen some folks go to C#. We're in a shift over to JavaScript. And so what that does for us is actually huge. And so a couple of different things. Let me see if I can organize my thoughts there. First, by going to standardized languages, there are large global communities that are already doing what you're looking to do. So that means there's other help forums out there. Lots of mainstream resources are already doing those types of things, which translates into available help and tools. As we look at standardized languages, there's other agencies or places you can go to learn about C# or learn about JavaScript that's not necessarily reliant on the manufacturer to create those tools. And in many cases, the tools that are out there, like a Code Academy or a Khan Academy for JavaScript specifically, they are likely better than anything I would probably be able to create realistically with small teams and small bandwidth. So using those mainstream tools can really rapidly expedite your training curve and learning curve, and having those communities to be able to bounce questions against using common syntax that's out there for a standard language. So I think as manufacturers in our industry move towards those kind of common platforms, they gain efficiencies in help resources as well as tools. There's a number of tools that can work with C#, a number of tools that can work with JavaScript. And so you're no longer dependent on a manufacturer to produce an entire ecosystem, of which the counterpart on the standard side is entire teams and companies. If you look at, like, Microsoft Visual Studio is a great example. At AMX previously, we had one gentleman writing our IDE platform, right? Whereas if Visual Studio, that's entire teams of hundreds of people writing those platforms, and they're able to progress them so much faster than maybe a manufacturer would traditionally progress their own custom tools. So for me, it's highly exciting. Sorry if you couldn't tell, but I really like that there is a migration in our industry towards these standardized platforms and languages, just because of the velocity of being able to get a lot of information quickly, instead of a team with maybe a few people creating content, trying to write from scratch how to do JavaScript like we've had to do in the past with our Netlinks language. It's a lot harder. I can look to a lot of other people to help me on that journey when I'm in standards-based languages versus the proprietary.
Well, and it's from my perspective too, it's a mixed bag, because on one hand, we've become accustomed to our vendors being the ones who train us. on how to use their products, how to implement their products. At the same time, I remember back to the days when I started learning AMX, when I was back in the Access days. And I'd be out on a job site at 9 o'clock at night, beating my head against the wall, trying to figure something out. And there wasn't anyone to call because everyone went home. Fast forward now to the idea that I'm using a standardized language that very likely before I even got hired into my job, I had training in. And if I hadn't, I can go online to, like you say, and go to Code Academy, Stack Overflow, all these resources to get real-time help with what I'm trying to do. And sure, it's a different application. I'm not going to find someone necessarily who's programming AV systems with JavaScript, but I'm going to find someone who's trying to use the function I am, or trying to, figure out the syntax or why something doesn't work. And that idea of having, additional resources, in my mind, it outweighs that scary bit of, oh my goodness, as an AV programmer, need to learn another language that I know is out there, but I haven't worked with before, or I haven't worked with in 15 years. It all plays into the factor, but at the same time, the potential is so much greater.
So one of the thoughts here is that some people are going to be in what they're doing and they're going to stay on path there. Others or may take that leap. And then it may also open the door to others joining the industry. Is this something that we should be concerned with? Is this something that is going to be a challenge for our industry, or do you feel like a natural evolution?
Personally, I think it's...
Go ahead, Jason.
I would say personally, I think it's something we should welcome, because as AV system programmers, we have been trained to think one way. So bringing in new talent from other industries like the IT world directly, or direct out of college for someone that may have studied computer science, they're going to have a different mindset. So this is going to challenge us all to elevate our game.
Well,
but at the same time, it is still scary too.
It is. Yeah. It is. I mean, I look at why did I get into AV programming in the first place? Because it's cool. Because we get to do cool things. We get to make really cool, integrations. And ultimately, I get to deliver an experience to my end user that achieves whatever their goal is, whether it's to teach a class, whether it is to conduct business meetings, whatever that is, that's still what we're delivering. It's just we've got new opportunities, and we've got the ability to leverage a whole nother talent pool to expand our capabilities. And like you said, Jason, to really challenge us in why are we doing something? If we sit and say, I'm doing it that way because I always have, you're gonna be able to keep going for a little while, but eventually you're gonna be outdated. You're gonna become irrelevant. If you stay in front of it, and what else can we do? What new way can we do to better ourselves, to better our company, to better the product that we're delivering? That's where there's great opportunity.
I also think, just from a talent pool standpoint, it's hugely important that we move towards these, because if we look at the industry as a whole, we've always struggled with bringing in new talent to the industry. And I see this as a perfect opportunity to, like Dave said, get those new opinions, those new ideas on how to do things by bringing in a person with prior programming experience in these other languages that we're looking at. It's a lot easier to find someone that's available, as someone to bring into the organization that has standardized languages than it is, as we've seen. Everyone on the call has participated at some extent of saying, how do I find another Crestron programmer, or how do I find another AMX programmer? Well, that's a very niche kind of area, right? But if I go out to the marketplace and say I need a JavaScript developer, that's a lot easier to find. And so it's not that there's going to be this flood on the market. No, I'm sorry, but no matter what great experience we deliver, it's not as sexy at times as the hot new app development firm or the hot new Silicon Valley firm. But there is that part of the population that's looking for jobs, and they're looking to do great work in software development. And this is that hidden little unknown niche that we can start marketing to those audiences to help fill that labor gap that we have at the programming specialty. I don't think anything else in an integration partner's stable of employee skills is as translatable as this particular role or function to be able to tap out to external markets and untraditionally used untapped markets for labor talent. I don't think you can just go find the AV designer. That doesn't really exist out for the most part in other disciplines, maybe in the IT world or anything of that nature. But programmer is unique because that one actually crosses a lot of different industry boundaries. And when you start aligning to standardized languages, you now have more options.
So kind of bringing this back to a little bit regarding the topics of the event. Dave, we talked a little bit about agile development. We talked a little bit about user experience. And I think I felt there were a lot of light bulbs going off. What were a couple of takeaways that you had, and some thought might be able to be applied in the near future?
I think actually the two you just hit on were two of the biggest ones for me. Harman having acquired a group that really focuses on user experience and user interface development. They came in and started talking, on a high level, but really looking at, they approached it from the standpoint of taking some software that was developed running on touchscreens within Harman, within AMX's headquarters. And they looked at the way it had been programmed previously, which is very similar to the way I've programmed a lot of systems. I'm going to guess you guys have as well. And looking at, okay, applying bigger picture industry best practices, using more modern techniques that our users are expecting from other interfaces that they touch on a daily basis. How can we as AV programmers turn around and do a better job of creating interfaces to match that expectation? And it was really sort of eye-opening, because I know I'm not the best user interface designer, but I tend to think that I do a pretty good job. Certainly I do as good as I can, and if I see a better way, I'm going to adopt it. But to open up and say, wait a minute, this company came in and said, the way I'm doing it, it's not bad, but there's a lot that could be improved on. It did sort of open my eyes. The other side was, there was a seminar talking about agile software development. And I've actually implemented agile with a team of developers that's separate from AV programmers within AVI. But to think of using an agile, mindset in deploying and programming and rolling out AV systems, it's something I never really considered, but it got the wheels turning, and just really thinking that there might be some benefits, maybe not for everyone, but certainly in the right cases, the right size company, the right, group of talent who will all, adopt it, there really could be some benefits to it. And again, it's just opening us up to new ideas that we don't have to implement them, but we can make informed or more informed decisions if we know they're out there and we really see and talk about them in the context of what we do.
So, Jason, similar question, and you've been to a number of these as well. What about this event got you thinking and makes you, is something that you can apply in the near future?
Well, I think the two biggest things are just definitely the presentation by Lighthouse and user interface design and how we should approach it to better the experience for a customer. I think that was huge. But I also feel very strongly too about the discussion of agile. I have been part of an organization that has tried to implement it, and talking to some of the other people in the room, understanding where the failure points can happen. What are the areas that you want to try to navigate away from so you can avoid failure when implementing an agile method? Because we still approach, as AV programmers and just AV industry overall, approach projects in a waterfall development process. We'll start with the design and we'll go all the way through until it's done, and then we start over again. And so understanding how to navigate or implement an agile method into that process and then navigate around the pitfalls that could bring you into failure. Those were key discussions to have with other people, and understanding how some people have been successful, where some people have failed, and then trying to balance and learn from those two pieces of data that you're getting from discussion. I look forward to, with being with AVI, of trying to implement an agile method as we move forward. Having my experience of knowing where it has failed for me in the past and taking from those experiences and pushing towards a successful implementation of it.
Well, Chris, I'm gonna wrap this up with you. Sounds like you got a lot of good feedback, and the group is feeling very energized by this event. What for next year? Can you and I know it's very early and hard to top this, and I'm sure you're still catching your breath. But in terms of looking ahead, any ideas or any thoughts in mind in terms of where you think things are headed?
As Jason and Dave mentioned, the biggest feedback we got was from the Lighthouse presentation, and Lighthouse is the organization within Harman that is that user experience consultancy firm. And so what I want to do next is we talked at a high level about what is UX and what are some of the principles that drive their suggestions to customers as they're doing consultancy. And so what I want to do next is take that UI that Dave mentioned that looks just like every other AV UI that we've seen in the industry and the workflows behind it. And then what I'd want to do with the community is break it down in a case study environment to say, these are the things we found as an outsider who's really classically trained in UX. Let's dive deeper into that, because I think there's a lot of quick value that we can add to our projects and designs by making some simple tweaks that that users subconsciously are looking for in those workflows and in what they find in a graphic user interface. I'm very excited to dive deeper in that, and I guess that's really what's been top of mind for me at the moment as we look ahead to next year's planning.
Well, appreciate that, and thanks for putting on a great event. Well, that's going to do it for today's show. I really appreciate all the insight that was provided by all our guests today, and I want to thank you guys individually. First, Chris, thanks for joining us. How can people find out more about Harman, the training program, get in touch with you, and so forth?
Okay. Well, the easiest way to reach us is off the Harman Pro website. That's pro.harman.com. You can go to the training link there and learn all about our training program. If anyone's interested in attending the developer conference next year, there's two ways to go. First, you can be a member of the Valued Independent Partner Program, which is independent service providers that are coding for AMX solutions as well as BSS, DSP programming. If you're not a member of VIP and you're an integrator like Dave and Jason, we have the ability to come if you're an AMX Solutions Master. And what that entails is really having the 5 different AMX certifications that are available. And so those folks are invited to attend the event as well. But if you want to reach me, the easiest way is just traininghelp@harman.com, and that'll reach me and we can answer any of your training related questions.
Thanks. Jason, I hope this was a good experience for you. Thanks for joining us. How can the audience reach you and learn more about AVI Systems?
Steve, thank you. I try to live a very off the net life. So the best way is through LinkedIn. I don't really try not to socialize my life outside of work. And I spend so much time at the computer that just try to keep it simple.
Cool. Great. And last but not least, Dave Hatz, always a pleasure to have you on. How can everyone reach you and, I guess, get more insight about AVI and things you're doing?
Certainly. AVIsystems.com is the best spot to find information about AVI, about all the solutions we can offer. To reach me directly, dave.hatz@avisystems.com gets me. I also am around the Twitterverse a little bit @DaveHatzAVI. LinkedIn works as well, but really avisystems.com is really where it all comes from.
Great. So my name's Steve Greenblatt. I've been your host. You can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on most social media platforms. Our company website is controlconcepts.com. Do a little bit of writing for the various publications, including the Infocom blog, and please reach out, and look forward to hearing from you. Another thing I'd like to see is if you can leave a note, comment on the AVNation website, avnation.tv. Let us know what you think about the show. Also, try to leave a review in the iTunes. That would help us to get more noticed and also know what you guys think. While you're on the AVNation website, take a chance to visit our underwriters. Those are the companies that support AVNation and to help to make these programs possible, as well as trips to trade shows and so forth. But that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us. This has been A State